In 2016, the Battlefield series and the studio of DICE wasn't in the best place. After releasing both Battlefield Hardline and Star Wars Battlefront the year prior, EA was under a lot of pressure as both games underperformed and were slated by reviewers. Hardline was said to be a poor excuse for a Battlefield game which did have an interesting setting but a poor execution, and Battlefront 1 had barely any content within its overall package, as well as a season pass which divided the player base. At this time, Modern Warfare and futuristic FPS games were becoming massively oversaturated, and there was a fatigue building because of how many games were released with this same style to them. Battlefield 4, released in 2013, was a huge success and probably one of DICE's best games they released for a while, despite being absolutely broken on launch. But with this Modern Warfare fatigue becoming more dominant in the industry, it was time for EA and DICE to go back to the drawing board and whip up something different for audiences. On the 6th of May 2016, EA released the trailer for their next Battlefield game titled Battlefield 1, and the trailer was an absolute triumph. With a fantastic soundtrack, awesome editing, and a refreshing setting during the horrors of World War I, Battlefield 1's announcement was a hit with audiences, and players couldn't wait to get this game when it finally released. It was such a good trailer that it actually won over a lot of Call of Duty players who were craving that classic combat style as well. On the 21st of October 2016, Battlefield 1 released to the world and quickly became one of the most successful Battlefield games of all time, selling over 15 million copies on the writing of this video and selling more than both Battlefield 4 and Hardline combined. It also got an average score of 88 out of 100 by most publications on consoles and PC. On the making of this video, Battlefield 1 is almost 5 years old and still to this day is regarded as one of the best Battlefield games by many in the community, or at least one of the best modern Battlefield games anyway. So I thought I would go back, re-download this game which won me over all those years ago, and see if Battlefield 1 and its expansions was truly a game changer. Was it really a top standard Battlefield game? So welcome to Wisefish, and today I give you a retrospective review of the 2016 classic Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 really does try its best at making a real hard-hitting game with a story that tells of the events of World War I. And it has to be said, it's so great to see a game focus on the events of World War I, a war that has been so overshadowed by its second installment. Apart from the game Valiant Hearts and Verdun, which are both fantastic games, there really haven't been any big World War I games that I've played anyway, which make this something totally refreshing. However, replaying Battlefield 1's campaign, I got to admit I was thoroughly disappointed with how poor the execution was for this real dark, harrowing take on World War I. The game starts amazingly, setting up the tone of the game, setting up the brutal nature of trench warfare, and really showing the player how utterly impossible this war was to fight in. Lack of ammo, awful visibility, explosions everywhere, and once a person gets killed, that's it. They will forever be remembered as just a name who volunteered their life for the flag of their country. Battlefield 1 knows exactly what it is doing with this introduction, and it somewhat reminds me of the D-Day landing mission within Allied Assault. It makes you, the player, realise that whilst these are fun events in a game, they are incredibly terrifying when you think about it, and to have the character's name pop up when you die is really a hard-hitting thing. It's the perfect way to set up the game's campaign in a setting that honestly, sadly, not many people know about. But after that final cutscene of the prologue, where both soldiers put their differences aside to see how utterly pointless the whole thing was, the campaign just lost all focus, and really it's such a shame. I think the biggest problem for me within the war stories was just how many there were. In this 5-hour campaign, if you are lucky, you are given 5 stories with 5 new characters and their squads, giving them each on average about 1 hour for you to get to know their story and what their war was like. It's an interesting thing to do, but the execution is just bad. With such a short amount of time, there is just no way you can gain a connection to any of them, especially when 70% of this hour is gameplay and the rest is short cutscenes. Through Mud and Blood is a good way to start, but there is no way you can relate to your main character and his tank buddies, as most of the time they make you do lone wolf stuff like taking on a whole damn German checkpoint on top of a hill and clearing out hidden forest defences, and the cutscenes see characters dying after like 10 minutes or them just being rash with actions that really have no impact on me emotionally. The pigeon bit was actually the most emotional part of this war story, but really it meant nothing in the long-term narrative. Friends in High Places tries and makes me care for an obnoxious American cheat who steals a British recon plane during the turning point of the war in 1917 and tries to help his partner win a medal after lying to everyone and getting a British commander killed in the most anticlimactic confrontation scene I've ever seen. Then his arrogance grows even more as he flies close to a huge German Zeppelin, chanting at a German AA gunner at close range and then risking both his and his partner's life by getting shot down onto the Zeppelin and running on top of it during a London raid whilst it's getting blown apart by his own allied forces. I mean, hell yeah, super relatable, hard-hitting storytelling right there. World War I pilots did that all the time, I hear. Avanti Savoia is a cool level with some fun, albeit gimmicky gameplay moments, as well as gorgeous landscapes, but it's just really a short poem or story about a man trying to find his friend. And whilst that sounds like praise again, it's so damn short put into a level that just feels like a multiplayer conquest mode that it really has no emotional impact whatsoever. It just feels like the most anticlimactic story ever, and what could have been a heartbreaking tale turned into a, well, that's another level down, what's next, tutorial style level. The runner is much more personal than any of them prior for me, where we see the relationship between an Australian veteran soldier who has seen his fair share of battles in his time and is now given a young recruit who is raring to go to look after during an honestly suicidal attack on the Ottoman Empire. It's probably my most favourite story, but again, it's so rushed. The relationship between our main character feels like it's skipped a step and there's no development between the two, which is a shame because this could have been something special and hard hitting. Then there's the Lawrence of Arabia story, Nothing is Written, which is about the resistant fighters trying to hit back against the Ottoman Empire with their technological rise as they uncover more oil for their war effort against the Commonwealth countries. It's meant to show that Lawrence of Arabia wasn't actually the man behind the fall of them and the only hero during this time. Instead, it was this silent female warrior who was the real dagger in them. Once again, it's a good attempt at exploring what the war was like out in the dunes of the Ottoman heartland, but it just fails to really show any story. If they wanted this focus on Lawrence of Arabia, they should have focused more on it. Instead, it just feels like this weird cameo for no apparent reason. Although saying that, it's one of the better stories in the campaign. The biggest problem I found in the game's multiple stories was again the length. There is no way you can deliver separate stories about 5 different main characters with emotional impact in 5 hours or less. It's just impossible. It also makes me sad as the game really sets up that this is going to be a hard-hitting, thought-provoking campaign with its prologue. It's dark, gritty, and it's going to display the cost of human loss. But then it just never follows through with that, and I feel like there was such a shame. No one really has done a AAA hard-hitting World War I game before. There's been countless World War II stories that have been really well executed, but honestly, I'd much rather play through the story within Valiant Hearts, The Great War, than any of these stories. I sadly just did not relate to any of their characters apart from maybe the runner, but even then, there's just not enough. What I think DICE missed out on massively here was making a truly hard-hitting and gritty campaign like it had in the prologue mission, that focuses on maybe just one specific group of characters, maybe just one main character as opposed to 5 different ones. With one you can tell much harder hitting stories like losing a best friend, witnessing the horrors of trench warfare, the evolution of warfare in World War I, and experiencing the final push on the Germans in 1918. Why couldn't we play as a squad of friends at the start of the war, maybe a British troop joining in 1915, and we see their evolution as humans as they progress through the years in the trenches, witnessing the Russians leaving their front to fight their revolution and having the American forces come in 1917 to help push the German forces back. You can explore their mental states, you can even see their reactions to what it was like when tanks and airplanes started getting added to the battlefield, and you can even have them exploring different areas from France to Italy Italy to Germany. There could have been such a rich, deep story that could have been explored here, which really helped educate audiences into what life would have been like for a soldier during World War I. I get story isn't what makes Battlefield stand out. I mean, it's always made as the multiplayer focused game for EA, but when you set a tone and theme like DICE do when you boot up the game with its haunting music and dark and gritty prologue, to then go a bit half-arsed on the campaign is very disappointing for me personally. I feel like there was an opportunity to tell a brilliant story about life as a soldier in World War I, but instead DICE went for the multiple stories, but didn't give them enough depth to be hard-hitting. This could be helped by some great levels and some fun combat, but sadly I just didn't enjoy that as well for the most part. I loved the air battles and the tank sections, despite the plane not really having the full mobility which is in the multiplayer, which is very odd. But those sections are great fun, although the plane I wouldn't say was exactly historically accurate, especially when this was a recon plane at the start, so why would it have rockets and a machine gun on the front and back? Doesn't really make much sense to me personally. But the ground combat level sections really suck in my honest opinion. Why this game chose a similar level design for almost all of the war stories I will never understand. In almost all of them you become this lone wolf sneaking around trying to take out enemy bases. Then in some it opens up into open areas and you have to take 3 objectives in any way you want. It's a cool idea, I like that they tried it, but there's no variety. It's always the same, and by the last level I was sick of stealthily making my way around. I wanted to get into a big battle with troopers helping me instead of it being me versus the whole German army, especially when one level has me as a lone wolf trying to take on a German encampment which has tanks whilst my squad's tank waits. Why? That's absolutely suicidal. I get that you're injured mate, but sending one man to do all this is absolute madness. I guess you had the Italian mission which was much more action packed, but it was so damn short it kind of felt pointless, and the runner and Through Blood and Mud was good fun, but apart from that the heavy focus on stealth really bored me after a while. There felt like there was no variety at all. Also, as a side note, these enemies when they spot you will know exactly where you are no matter what, meaning if you blow your stealth, good luck ever trying to hide and recover it. Their accuracy is just unbelievable here. Snipers, mortars, machine guns, they all know your exact locations no matter how much you move about and hide. It's just so unforgiving, no matter what difficulty you're on. But going back to the main levels for a second, the lack of any real trench levels was a bit disappointing for me. Whilst yeah, you can't have a campaign where it's just waiting to go over the top, experiencing weapons clogging, trench foot and shell shock, just one level where you charge over the top with your huge squad like you do with the D-Day landings in Allied Assault would have been something so memorable, especially if it was at the Somme or Passchendaele or something of such significance. You could have even ended the game on this like a Blackadder style mixed with Halo Reach's ending. Maybe you and your remaining squad from 1915 are doing their final push in 1918, the last real attack on the German army before the end of the war, and after you jump out of the trench the game turns into the prologue style, and after a certain amount of bullets that hit you, the screen shows the main character's name with MIA or something and the date. For me that would have been hard hitting, it would have felt like a journey, and I could have related to my main character and the characters around him. Sadly I just did not relate to any of the stories, and instead it felt like a rushed effort at trying to make these stories stand out and unique. I would say I hope going forward Battlefield can go back to making engaging and memorable stories like you got in Bad Company 2 for example. But after Battlefield 5 launched with literally the same template of war stories, I really don't have hope for if they were to explore World War I again. Sadly, I do not like Battlefield 1's story for its decision to go from a single linear campaign to multiple short stories that have pretty poor levels. I think it really misses so many opportunities. But again, that's not the main focus of the game. The main focus is the multiplayer, and boy, this is where Battlefield 1 shines. No multiplayer game out there really captures and immerses me into this massive war zone as much as Battlefield games do, and Battlefield 1 is for me the pinnacle of an immersive war zone. The fact that Battlefield still is one of the only big FPS games to have this huge 64-player multiplayer with squad elements, respawns and objectives just astounds me, and none are more fun to play than in this game. The vast nature of almost all of the maps means that everywhere you look there is something going on. You get to a high point and there will be battles happening all around you. Infantry battles to take an inside bunker, vehicle bombardments as they try to take or defend an objective, and mad panics inside trenches as there is a stalemate to take the last objective or get the final kills of the game. Whether Battlefield 1 is the best multiplayer experience or not, you cannot deny that when getting into these matches there is a real sense of grand scale war, and it hardly ever gets boring because of how frantic it is all the time. I never went into a battle and thought to myself, there is nothing really going on, or I'm struggling to find anyone on the map. Everywhere I went on these absolutely stunning battlegrounds there were things going on, and I always found myself creating my own little narrative with my squad, trying to flank objectives, trying to hold our ground in a bunker. I always loved these massive battles, and again it really did feel like a grand scale mad war. Keeping the classic Battlefield classes means there is a real encouragement to work together as a team, be that reviving your team and squad mates to try and make that final push, be that resupply your team to make sure they can keep up their combat effectiveness, be that spotting enemies from a distance with the scout, or be that taking out threatening vehicles that are trying to camp or advance on a spot. Battlefield always rewards you for playing those roles, and it means these games are far more about teamwork and not just lone wolfing it like it is in other games. And that is only helped more when you have a squad leader who helps with setting the objectives and gets the team to fight together as one. It makes for me a much more enjoyable and engaging experience, and allows for the community to actually work together and communicate more, something you don't really get in many other multiplayer games unless you play with a party of friends or a clan. I do have to say though, playing as a support in objective based games is a goldmine for points. I selected it a lot of times during matches, and even though I'd get like 5 kills just by putting my ammo packs down, I would always be at the top of the leaderboards simply by just resupplying my team. It's utter madness. I feel sorry for scouts, as I always felt like they were the lowest when it came to getting points, unless they are like super good with aim and find a good spot to camp from. However, despite saying a lot of the community are quite friendly and communicative on PC, there are a few who are still absolute salty boys who want to have a go at anyone who breathes. I mean, this is the internet after all. Also, there are still some who cheat in the game, getting headshots with tanks and 70+ kills in the game of Operation without any deaths at all. I mean, why would you play a Battlefield game just to cheat? I mean, look at this guy. He kept reviving us so we were stuck on this ledge, and he had over 270 kills with only 4 deaths. He also had no body at all. I mean, what an absolute loser. But regardless, it was so nice to see that players on both teams hated this attitude and we were all in the same boat. I was actually surprised with how tame and friendly the Battlefield community are in this game. Maybe that's because Battlefield 1 is an older game and it's the more loyal fans playing, but still, I've got to say I was actually surprised. I do also have to praise Battlefield for trying to introduce more game modes that can appeal for outsider audiences, more Call of Duty style arcade battle arenas to help try and get them into the feel of Battlefield, like standard team deathmatch, capture the hill type games, and the ridiculous pigeon game, which is clearly a joke, but it's still quite fun if you can find a game in it. Spawns are still awful in them, however, and the game modes just seem a little boring and bland for a Battlefield game with not much happening, and that madness is just gone a bit. But with all that said, nothing compares to the 32v32 game modes like Conquest and, most importantly, Operations. Operations is the single greatest thing about Battlefield 1 in my opinion, and probably one of the best game modes Battlefield has ever created. This game mode is absolutely perfect for the setting of World War I and really shows you that panic and madness of trying to gain ground against your enemy who will stop at nothing to hold their ground. There are many things I love about Operations, but I got to say I really admire how educational this mode is, and call me a nerd all you like, I don't care. But I love how with every operation there is a sort of history lesson telling you what actually happened during this campaign and what led to it. I never really knew about the events at Gallipoli, but learning about it from this game and then experiencing it within this operation was really interesting and made me want to go and learn more about it. I got to understand why it was such a disaster for the British and how it was an absolute slaughter for both sides. It's also interesting to hear in the what if scenarios for if, for example, Germany was able to fight back and retake their lost ground in 1918, or if the British failed at taking that important ground in 1917 during the turning of the war. Learning what could have happened for me really was quite interesting, very thought-provoking, making you realise how important these operations were for the troops involved and how one battle could have changed the whole outcome of the war. But getting into the actual gameplay of the operations, my god, these are like full-on games of their own. Forget the campaign levels, these multiplayer modes on their own by far trump them. Playing conquest game modes encourages you to work as a team, but somehow operations up this and almost demand you work together as a team, or you will really suffer and lose very fast. It encourages you to have all of the classes running to have peak combat effectiveness. If you are an attacking team, if you don't have hard-working medics reviving everyone around and healing your team, you will quickly lose troops and you will lose heavily. It's almost anger-inducing when a medic runs over your body in this mode and doesn't heal you. Like, why would you do that, and why would you even pick medic? The same applies for the defending team with support and medics. If you skimp on medics and support, you can run out of ammo or troops defending the objective and quickly lose ground to this onslaught of attackers. The game can turn to utter madness, and again it's just so much fun. But winning a round or losing a round is not the end. Having multiple tries just adds to that excitement. If the enemy team gain a Zeppelin or a Juggernaut or an armoured train or even specialists, the game can completely turn on its head. It's just so unpredictable at times, and even if you quickly sweep the map of the first few objectives, all it takes is one regroup of the defenders and it's game on again. To then be able to go to another area to defend or attack there is just incredible, as it is this brand new environment you have to get to know, and being able to get all of the objectives in all of the maps and win the operation is such a good feeling, especially as the music keeps building during the game when objectives are taken and builds to an amazing climax at the end of the match. Such good music design in this game mode. I absolutely love what it adds to the atmosphere. However, with that said, it does feel a bit unfair depending on the map. I get that the game is trying to show how some operations were heavily in favour of one side. For example, Gallipoli is meant to be a horrific loss for the British army, but man, did they have to make it that hard for the British to actually win in this multiplayer game? Trying to get up the beach is almost impossible and sometimes ruins the whole experience. Same as some of the desert campaigns where the attackers just have an endless amount of vehicles compared to your team, and again it just feels like the game is helping a team to win as it fits the narrative of the operation, and that is quite frustrating most of the time. But saying that, it's not impossible, and if you do succeed in these maps, it's a real sweet victory. Sadly, you have lots of camping players in these modes, and the telescopic machine guns are the most irritating thing, as you cannot see anyone from across the map using one of these, whereas you can with a sniper, and in my opinion it's extremely frustrating most of the time. But that madness is part of the charm of Operations, and it kind of fits what would have been happening to some extent. But I have to say, my god, well done DICE for creating a game mode that is extremely fun to play with a squad and a full 32 player team, but also fits the themes of World War I completely. Kudos to you. I know I sort of mentioned this earlier, but the maps are truly stunning and so well planned out, with so much to see and do, and so many different ways of venturing around them, with houses to take cover in, fortifications near objectives, no man's land areas where if you run around them you are most likely to be shot by something, or complex trench systems which allow for more close quarter combat. Whilst most of them are from the campaign, they are all so much fun to play during these absolutely mad firefights. It's such a shame that the French armies and the Russians were held back until the expansions, because honestly their maps are some of my personal favourites, visually anyway. The gorgeous poppy fields is a sight to behold and really contrast the brutality of combat going around, and the flames that fill the air of Verdun, or better known as Devil's Anvil, are just haunting to fight in, like it's hell itself. Whilst Russia's maps are a bit bland in comparison, with some firefights seeming not as fun, which is hard to explain why I feel that way, they still look visually stunning, and it's nice to explore some of Russia during one of their most important historical events in the country's history. I do wish more people would play the Russian operation, as I can never find a match on them, but I do remember it wasn't that much fun when it initially came out, sadly. Having the Somme and Passchendaele locked off until the last expansion, however, seems a bit of a missed opportunity. Arguably the most known battles of World War I, and they're locked off and released 2 years after the base game. I mean, I think that's such a bad move personally. Maybe that's just because I'm a history freak though, and I really wanted to see their take on those maps. But saying that, whilst visually I think they are some of the best, I do feel in terms of gameplay they are a bit disappointing. They aren't nearly as vast in comparison, and I don't know, I just didn't enjoy playing the DLC maps as much as I did with some of the base maps. And speaking of gameplay, I know I'm just going to regurgitate what people have said over and over again since this game came out, but I hate how reliant people are on using automatic weapons as well as gas grenades and other more modern styles of combat, especially going back to the game now. Everyone seems to use the same weapons all the time. It's either the small machine guns, telescopic machine guns, or just a certain sniper. There's no variety in people's arsenal, and that annoys me, as it's stated on the wiki about this game that the choice to go to World War I was so the team DICE could help players experiment with all the unique weapons that World War I offered. That would be great if the game actually launched with a unique set of guns, and if people had more options to choose from. Instead, almost 5 years later, everyone seems to be using the same guns almost every game. The feel of the guns, however, is incredible. The feedback on every single one with the amazing sound design really adds to that immersion again, and just getting a kill feels very, very satisfying, especially with a bolt action sniper rifle. I do dislike how realistic they feel sometimes, like the fact that you have to stand still with some guns to get an accurate shot is a bit annoying, especially when a guy with a machine gun can just spam the trigger, which makes for those weapons to feel redundant in comparison. And I personally prefer the look and design of those guns that are harder to use, especially the bolt action rifles. To be honest, that was my favourite mode within this game, one that I felt DICE didn't really encourage, and that was the keeping it classic bolt action rifle only modes, where everyone is on an even playing field. It makes gunfights so much more tense when you miss a shot and have to reload hoping that the enemy isn't super accurate. Close quarter becomes so much more tense, and you are more likely to panic and pull out your sidearm to take them out, or your melee weapon. It's so true to how I'd view fighting in World War I in my opinion. The problem is the maps aren't designed for this style of combat, so it just makes it impossible to push up to an objective in operations, as you need vehicles and other weapons to really make the difference. I really wish there was a bigger focus on more traditional weaponry in the game modes. As well as that, I still can't warm to the specialists. They just seem like a weird feature. They annoyed me back then, and they still do now. In the campaign as well, they are just these bullet sponges for no real reason, and I just do not get why. It almost reminds me of the later Medal of Honor games, where enemies the higher their rank start becoming like raid bosses, where you unload tons and tons of ammo in them just to kill them. It pulls you out of that immersion when a guy in an operation comes around the corner, and despite unloading tons of bullets in them, they don't die and they just kill you in a few shots. Same as horses. When did horses start having metal plated skin? They are already fast and have better mobility. Did they really need to be bullet sponges? I just think it's a bit of a weird move to have specialists. It feels like it was just added because it was something DICE added to Star Wars Battlefront and just moved it over. Like I say, it just ruined my immersion. The one huge negative I have with multiplayer and its gameplay, however, is there's still nothing to really aim for even after all these expansions. Whilst you do have skins for guns and some vehicles now and weekly medals, they don't really do much, especially the medals, which are so hard to unlock sometimes. The gun customization is so limited and so underwhelming, with some guns just having minor changes to them like a slightly faster fire rate or an optical zoom. The only real thing you can change is the skin, and some of the skins are just plain boring. The more levels you unlock, you can unlock more guns, and it's nice that the DLC guns, there are challenges to unlock them, but it's really underwhelming how little there is to really work towards even after 4 expansions. Even with your class's character, you cannot alter them to make them stand out or look just a little bit more unique. It's another missed opportunity in my opinion. There's no real badge or thing to show off how successful you are in playing operations or conquest matches. There are dog tags, but honestly I don't think people really care for them anymore. Maybe they do, but I barely notice them in games honestly, unless I got a melee kill. It's just a shame there's nothing to really work towards, because the game is just so much fun to play in multiplayer, but I never felt like I was being rewarded for playing. Instead, I was just given this loot box which 90% of the time didn't give me anything of value, or gave me a useless puzzle piece which takes years to unlock. And I'm being serious, I've played tons of this game over the years and I am still yet to unlock a full puzzle. I just got bits and pieces of other little ones. It's really frustrating. This still doesn't take away from how goddamn fun and immersive Battlefield 1's multiplayer is. It's honestly one of the best experiences I had back in the day and still have all these years later. And that is all thanks to fantastic maps, satisfying combat and fantastic game modes, especially with operations. It's 2021 now in the making of this video, and still the game is thriving on PC in operations and conquest mainly, and it's still as fun as ever. You know, with everything bad about EA, you can't deny their games look absolutely stunning. But there's something about Battlefield 1 compared to their latest Battlefield game that is so special. Battlefield 1 doesn't have the latest RTX or lighting engine, but its graphics look absolutely stunning still. The lighting is impeccable, and the level of detail on the terrains is incredible. DICE, using their Frostbite engine, really utilised their photorealism on every texture, making trenches look grim as everything. No Man's Land look plague ridden, with puddles looking like every virus and bacteria on this planet lives there. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the fires surrounding the map of Devil's Anchor look haunting and terrifying, and then the red petals flying through the air in this map look super relaxing in a weird way. The level of detail is just incredible, and it still holds up well. The desaturated tones I feel was a brilliant look to the game. It really helps it stand out as quite bleak, and helps objectives and point of interests on the map stand out so much more. It really has its own unique style to it, but also allows the game to keep that dark and gritty tone to fit the World War I themes. It's really a great direction if you ask me. Every gun is so detailed as well, and I love how if you go through the mud, your gun gets covered in it and it will take a while for it to come off. The animations of the guns reloading as well are just incredible. They're so satisfying to watch most of the time. The way the maps change during the battle is also awesome, and the destructibility of landscapes again is a spectacle to behold. Watching Zeppelins come down is one of the most incredible sights as well. It was so cool here in this clip I forgot to move and got crushed by it. These are just incredible to watch even now. I also love how minimal the HUD is. It means you take in the battleground around you instead of all the data on the screen. It's a shame there's hit markers on the guns, but I actually quite like them. They make a nice satisfying sound when you do get a kill, so I'll let them slide here. But I am still blown away by the look of this game. It really has not dated in the slightest, and I love the graphics in both the campaign and the multiplayer. The lighting, however, does go through the map itself, which is odd sometimes, but maybe that was intentional for some reason. I do, however, still get bugs. Why are there still bugs in this game, especially graphical ones? These trees here kept flashing throughout this whole 30-minute game, and wow, it was an eyesore. I also had a ton of pop-in on some maps with mud, popping into shot or textures taking a while to load, and there were a few times I'd die under the map. I know some people also still find ways to go underneath the map and snipe from there, and that is very annoying, but luckily not many people do this, and those bugs are not that often. But my biggest problem with Battlefield 1 is the actual interface now. My word, the menu system is one of the worst I have ever seen. Actually, that's not true. Battlefield 5's is worse, but Battlefield 1's is awful as well. The blocks are just so unattractive. The promoted stuff for other games makes no sense, and the new updated one with the other games on the side just simply doesn't work. I have Battlefield 5 installed and I still can't just swap between the games. It just tells me to buy the game. It just doesn't make any sense. The party system still doesn't work all of these years later. I can invite my friend to the party, but if I then join a game, he doesn't get brought along with me automatically. And if he hasn't got premium, even if there's room in the game and he's in my party, he can't join until the priority premium players get a spot. It's an utter joke of a system. Why bother having a party system if it doesn't automatically match you together? He even got swapped to the enemy team at one point despite us being in the smallest squad and in my party again. Why? The game in 2016 also launched lacking quite a bit of content with just coming soon everywhere, and now with its expansions it does have more maps, but honestly it still feels a bit empty in areas, and I personally really hoped for more from this game, especially as it was fully supported for 2 years after its release. But honestly, apart from some new guns and maps, there's really not much new, and it annoys me that there are microtransactions to buy all the new guns instead of actually earning them. The Origin store is littered with these damn packs. It's awful. The fact that the server browser is still pretty empty and DICE owns all the servers, there's no custom maps or community run servers or anything. It's another missed opportunity. This could have been something truly special with custom maps that were like trench game modes or even a forge mode or something that really helped community engagement. But instead EA ruled that out, and it means the game is just sort of there, finalized but still empty in some aspect. But apart from that, I still love it. I really do enjoy Battlefield 1. I don't think it's the best Battlefield game out there, but that multiplayer, the graphics and the gameplay is truly special for me. I have many problems with it. I think the campaign was underwhelming and missed lots of opportunities. I feel like it's missing a lot in terms of things to earn, and the look of the menu is just a real eyesore. But when I got this game back in 2016, I fell in love with its totally refreshing tone and feel. Sure, it's not a true realistic World War I experience, but it's still something new and different to all the other mainstream FPS games. I really hope DICE can do another game like this, but next time expand and take some risks with the formula and really make it the biggest and best it can be. But for now, Battlefield 1 is still a super damn fun game to play, and operations and grand scale war modes are still a joy to play almost 5 years later. But those are my thoughts on Battlefield 1 all these years later. What did you guys think? Do you agree with me? What did I get wrong? And what was your favourite thing about this game? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, a share, or just tell me in the comments. Sub if you haven't already, as that will really help us try and get that milestone of 5,000 subscribers. If you want to support this channel, you can join my Discord or follow me on Twitter at WiseFishGaming and Twitch at WiseFishYT to watch me play some Minecraft on Sundays and other games hopefully during the weekdays. Also, if you want to support me financially, you don't have to, but if you want to, the link to my Patreon is below, and you can also hit that join button below to become a channel member. And speaking of which, a big shout out to my patrons, starting with Duquesne23, our big fish, JP and Dylan, our sharks, and our now 4 huge megalodons, Sinus, Morgan Brazier, JJD896, and Whale Such Gaming. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support. And also a big shout out to our Wise One YouTube member, Jambu, for his consistent support. But that is all for now. I will be covering Battlefield 5 in my next video, and wow, do I have a lot to say about that game. But for now, thank you all for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.